Is Adam Thompson. I'm a counselor at Northern Focus Counseling Service here in Whitehorse, Yukon, and I also work for the Youth Justice Department at Health and Social for the Yukon government here in Whitehorse. Excuse me. Of course, my voice would have to start to crack just before I start my presentation. So I've always been told that starting off with a joke is a way of breaking ice with people. So a seasonal affective disorder joke. The best way to avoid seasonal affective disorder is to stay busy with fun winter activities such as contemplating your own mortality and yelling at snow, which is kind of something that a lot of Yukoners have a tendency to do after a huge snowfall, particularly this year. So I was born and raised in the Yukon. I have lived, as I was mentioning to Vicky, I've lived in Kamloops for 10 years, where I worked for the Kamloops Indian Band doing drug and alcohol counseling with their First Nations youth. I moved back to Whitehorse in 2003, and I've done several different positions here. Primarily, I've been working for the last 10 years at the Young Offenders Facility, and in the last year and a half at Northern Focus Counseling. I'm a certified Canadian counselor, CCC, through the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapist Association, the CCPA. In my spare time, I volunteer with a cat rescue organization here in town, and I teach spinning classes at a local gym. Growing up in the North, I know firsthand how cold and dark winter months can affect mental and physical health, specifically how a lack of sunlight can produce what we call Seasonal Affective Disorder, or SAD. Today, my presentation will be talking about SAD and steps in developing habit-forming actions through light therapy, diet and exercise behaviors in the home, gym, or at work, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy approaches, CBT, to improve self-perceptions around feeling blue in the winter months. And like Vicky said, if anybody has any questions or concerns during the presentation, just leave them in the message box to the side, and I will answer them as we go along. So first of all, people ask, what is SAD? If you go back to 1984, there was a researcher in Washington, Seattle, Washington, who was kind of just on his radar that a lot of patients were coming in with this kind of low-grade depression, not serious depression, but it almost seemed like it was seasonal and kind of in tune with fall, winter, and even spring. So he put out a survey. Seattle, of course, I mean, it doesn't get a lot of sunlight because it's a rainy area, and people don't seem to know that seasonal affective disorder is actually not affected by temperature. It's a lack of sunlight. So you can still be like in a very warm climate, but if you're not getting sun because of clouds blocking the sun, you can have seasonal affective disorder. So anyway, he put out this survey, and he basically thought he might get a couple hundred responses, and he ended up getting several thousand. I think it was around 6,000 or 7,000 individuals saying that they seem to suffer from some sort of seasonal depression. So in 1987, it was added to the American Psychiatric Association's manual, the DSM-3 revised. And in, I think it was 1990, in the current APA DSM-5, we talk about depressive episodes with seasonal patterns, a regular temporal relationship between onset of major depressive episodes and a major depressive disorder and a particular time frame. So example, like fall or winter. Some of the symptoms that people exhibit while suffering from SAD: sleeplessness, craving carbohydrates, difficulty concentrating, depressed mood, anxiety, irritability, weight gain, lethargy, decreased libido, and hyperphagia, which is increased drive around consumption of food. Back in the day, we would talk about cabin fever in the Yukon or the northern parts of Canada, where people seem to exhibit these types of behavior. And one of the reasons why they actually started what we're having this week is Rendezvous, was to let off some steam and have people socialize around a long part of the winter months, so people were feeling better about getting into spring and maybe getting past the winter. Yeah, so we talk about the chances of you experiencing seasonal affective disorder depends on your latitude to a point. I mean, it might seem obvious that higher latitudes would experience colder, darker, and longer winters, so SADS might be more prevalent. There is evidence for this. One study indicated that anybody below the 30th parallel, their percentage of SAD reporting among the population was about 1%. Above the 45th parallel, which is, well, the 30th was around Florida, and the 45th is around Toronto, I think. They experience between 9 and 10%. Canadians are at increased risk for developing SAD because of our geographical location. The further away from the equator, the more lack of sunlight we experience. About 2 to 3% of Canadians will experience SAD in their lifetime. Another 15% will experience milder form of SAD, which we call the winter blues, which is a slight depression, but still able to live their life without major disruptions. People with seasonal affective disorder make up about 10% of all depression cases. So I tried to do some research on the average sunshine for Whitehorse, Yukon, and surprisingly enough, I found quite an extensive amount of data on this. And I'm just looking at the chart right now. So as this data compilation was put together, I think in about 2015. So it says here, like in January, there's a total of 44 hours of sunlight and a total of 18 days. The peak time is in July, where we have 248 hours of sunlight and 30 days, that's our midnight sun episodes. We started seeing a decrease in September, 133, October, 85, November, 40, December, 27. And you can see it starts reducing. Like December, the total days of sunlight that we have are 15. So that decreased amount of sunlight, this is when people start feeling this onset. And it's not like you wake up one morning and all of a sudden, like it hits you like a truck. It's very kind of creeps into people's mental and physical health, and it just kind of starts changing sleeping patterns. It starts changing thought patterns, depression, as well as carbohydrate craving and sugar cravings, which we'll be talking about later. I have just my notes in front of me, so I can't really see the camera. How's everybody doing? We're good? Thumbs up? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Vicky. So as we talk about seasonal affective disorder, it doesn't affect everybody in the same way. On splitting on gender lines, the most women seem to be affected more by seasonal affective disorder than men. They're about 4 times more likely to develop SAD than men. They make up between 60 and 90% of those who suffer from winter blues, and the age group is between 18 and 55. A recent study that kind of delved into any links with vegetarianism, thinking that maybe perhaps it was associated with SAD. And there was actually a strong correlation. Vegetarians are 4 times higher than the normal population to have SAD symptoms. There was a belief that perhaps vegetarians are more likely to forego antidepressants, or it had to do something perhaps with the levels of iron or animal proteins in the diet, as well as thiamine, which is, I couldn't quite understand the thiamine aspects, but if anybody ever looks up thiamine and regulation of seasonal affective disorder, you can get back to me. And further, the kind of the tip of the spear on this, we don't actually know what causes seasonal affective disorder. While researchers haven't figured out what factors cause SAD, the most popular theory is a phase shift hypothesis that due to later sunrises and earlier sunsets, the body's circadian rhythms sometimes get out of whack with its sleep-wake cycles, like several months of jet lag. If anybody's ever experienced jet lag, it can be absolutely disabling. I remember an anthropologist talking about the most significant invention ever created by mankind, and people think the wheel or like the radio, computers. But his response was that when human beings started using artificial light in the Industrial Revolution, when they started producing massive amounts of light bulbs, it really changed how people sleep and work and their social lives, because we're no longer kind of in sync with the sun, even the moon. And people work night shifts. People are up, later at night, when normally before that ability to have artificial light, we kind of went to bed when the sun went down because it was too dark to do anything else. That also tied into our circadian rhythms, where the body produces melatonin and serotonin in sync with the sun, and that kind of allows us to fall asleep properly. When people have SAD, their melatonin and serotonin levels are dysregulated. Melatonin is overproduced, and serotonin you start seeing a reduction in serotonin, which imbalances our circadian rhythms. And like I was saying before, temperature does not actually affect seasonal affective disorder. It has to do with sunlight. So you can be in a city like Seattle, Washington, where it's pretty mild, it's pretty temperate, but because it's so cloudy, people don't get enough sunshine. It can really affect people's moods. We also talk about stress and biological predispositions can attribute to SAD. Seasonal depression can be caused by more than just a lack of light in the winter months. The two main causes are stress and biological predispositions. If there's a history of seasonal affective disorder in a person's family, someone can be more susceptible to getting seasonal depression. During the winter, when there is less sun, those with seasonal mood disorders can't handle stress as easily. The dark days make it more challenging to meet expectations around everyday life expectations, and people become more tired. This becomes almost like a looping type of behavioral cycle where people, they get stressed out because they're not able to get up, they're not able to perform. And again, if you're calling in for work because you haven't slept all night, or you can't get out of bed, that's going to affect your employment, affect your relationships with people in your life, personal and professional. So it kind of feeds into that whole stress and anxiety that SAD can also produce in conjunction with the depressive states. Managing your stress can alleviate symptoms of SAD. When feeling exhausted, a person's mood deteriorates and becomes more difficult to handle. This has the effect of pushing someone deeper into depression. To try to minimize stress in the coming months, individuals with seasonal depression disorder should think ahead. You can pre-plan. I have clients who are very, very aware that every year this is what happens. Like around October, November, they start to slide and they start feeling depressed. And I tell them, let's start increasing your vitamin D consumption. Let's get you into light therapy. If you have the economic means, let's talk about getting you out of the north for a couple of weeks in somewhere hot, some sun and some sand, just to offset the potential depressive aspects of SAD. Now, as well, SAD affects everybody differently. We have people who get that winter blue, where they feel a little bit down, but they're able to function. And then I have clients who go absolutely deep dive into a very, very serious depression, where we're talking perhaps pharmaceutical support and trying to get them back up just to a baseline where they can function properly, and then talking about cognitive behavioral therapy approaches. And like I said, people who with serious enough winter blues can plan a sunny vacation and get out of here for a couple of weeks, which is I'm sure everybody would like to do when it's minus 45 outside here in the Yukon. All that said, seasonal affective disorder is treatable. For years, basically the gold standard for treatment of SAD has been light therapy. I'm sure some of you have seen those light boxes with the bright white light that people use. Generally, they recommend that you use it first thing in the morning, around your breakfast, to sit with it. I didn't realize this, but apparently it's really hard on your retinas. So they recommend that you sit with it to the side so that you're not damaging your eyes. What it does is it helps regulate, when I mentioned before, the production and usage of melatonin in the brain. There's a nerve that's actually connected to the hypothalamus, which connects to our retinas, which stimulates the hypothalamus, which is responsible for the regulation of melatonin levels in our brain. So this is important for people with SAD because they often have too much melatonin in their systems, as melatonin regulation functions best with adequate amounts of both light and dark. You can have seasonal affective disorder in the summertime as well. Hypermania, where your melatonin and serotonin levels are dysregulated so that you're in a hyper state. We talk about bipolar mood disorder, where depression and mania kind of cycle back and forth, and people can actually have manic episodes in the middle of summer due to having too much sunlight and dysregulation of melatonin and serotonin. Hypermania, then hypomania, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, where people are depressed, which is what we're talking about today with the seasonal depression. But when people talk about SAD, it's both summer and winter. By using light therapy daily, particularly within the first 2 hours of waking up, people with SAD can get natural melatonin systems off to the right start. Does anybody have any questions so far, or any comments? We're good? Still thumbs up? It's just you and me, Vicky, on the camera, so.
There is a question.
Oh, okay. I can't seem to, I don't think I.
Okay.
Oh, here it is on my chat. Hold on 1 second here. Bonnie asked, I'm just going to read out your question. Are there any other supplements or herbs besides vitamin D that could be helpful? That's a good question. It's funny because vitamin D, when I was researching SAD, is kind of the go-to, right? I mean, everybody talks about vitamin D, vitamin D, vitamin D. I know that myself, being a vegetarian, I do a B12 supplement as well as iron, and vitamin C for my immune system during the winter months that help. As far as herbs go, I'm not very familiar with herb supplements, so I'm not too sure about that. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah, good. Okay. And keep the questions coming if anybody has any. Well, look at this. We're talking about vitamin D. What a coincidence. So vitamin D aids in a variety of important functions, including keeping our bones strong, absorbing other minerals and vitamins, and managing blood sugar levels. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, so it's stored in our fat tissue. Our body actually produces vitamin D naturally in sunlight, but it has to be warmer. I think it's above 20 degrees in the sun for our bodies, and then it stores it. And what happens is, as we have that reduction in sunlight, our bodies, basically our reserves go down to a point where we need to supplement them. I was going to touch on it in this presentation, but there was a infamous ad campaign about 5 years ago with the Yukon government where they were basically saying, "Are you getting your D?" which was kind of a connotation of something else. And it actually ended up on Jay Leno, which was kind of funny to see that our little community had this infamous ad campaign. It was on buses. It was like very, very heavily kind of in full rotation. And then they realized what the connotation was, and they took everything down. But it's still out there if you Google it. It was pretty funny for such a small community. Bonnie asks, does accessing, did you mean exercising, Bonnie? Yes? Okay. Yeah, and I'm actually going to get into that in a sec here. We'll talk about exercise and what it does around seasonal affective disorder. Thanks for the question. So yeah, like I said, vitamin D manages blood sugar levels. Vitamin D is also involved in the synthesis of serotonin and dopamine, which dopamine is that feel-good chemical, neurochemical linked to if you don't have enough dopamine in your system, it can also lead to depressive states. But dopamine is kind of our brain's go-to when we're trying to feel good. Oh, here, Bonnie. Yes, you can get vitamin D from salmon as well as mushrooms. I didn't know that, but yeah, apparently mushrooms have a lot of vitamin D if you're not looking to take an actual supplement. So vitamin D deficiencies can be linked to a variety of health concerns, not just seasonal affective disorder, such as bone loss, fatigue, and a weakened immune system. There was a lot, I kind of did some research on the linkage between seasonal affective disorder and vitamin D, if there was a strong correlation. And it's funny, like there's these camps that kind of come out that one's very, very super pro vitamin D in its, its effectiveness towards us helping people with seasonal affective disorder. And then there's other camps who are like, no, it doesn't have any sort of health benefit. And it's just kind of it's a myth. So it depends, I guess. Vitamin D, we can take vitamin D without a large, there's not a lot of consequences because our body produces it naturally. You can overdose on vitamin D and it can make you sick. So, if you go online, you can see how many 1,000 milligrams or 1,000 EUs you're supposed to be taking for your size and body weight. I take 3,000 to 4,000 a day. But because I'm a bigger guy, that might be something, but maybe too much for somebody who's smaller. But so since increased exposure to light has been shown to be one of the most effective steps in treating people with SADS, and since a main source of vitamin D is sunlight, it makes sense to conclude that seasonal depression and vitamin D are connected. The actual testing of this hypothesis, however, has been widely mixed. The Dutch out of the Netherlands are very big studies on seasonal affective disorder, because I guess, again, they might have a lot of it because of being a port city or a port nation, lots of, rainy, cloudy days, but they seem to have a lot of research going around on seasonal affective disorder and vitamin D. Yeah, so, and I'm sure we all have been in this one. SAD can make you crave sugar. Now, sugar is also, people think, white granulated sugar, but carbohydrates are also, they're considered to be, there's aspects of their breakdown in the body into fat and sugars. Did I hear somebody turn on their mic, or we're okay? We're good? Okay, just want to make sure. Weight gain when suffering from seasonal depression can be attributed to sugar cravings. The lack of light during winter months slows the release of serotonin. Again, it's a feel-good neurochemical that makes us feel, happy and content. This is a brain chemical that affects a person's mood. Weight gain can have both negative psychological and physiological effects on how someone feels. When we eat food that are sugary or rich in carbohydrates, the brain sees an increase on of the neurochemical serotonin. Focusing on eating healthy during the winter months can keep energy up, can help reduce the effects of seasonal affective disorder. When we seek out high sugar, high carbohydrate foods, we call them fast burn carbohydrates, like donuts, cookies, cake, and pie. They don't stay in our system very long. We see a big spike in our sugar and a big spike in our insulin levels, and the body has a kind of a predisposition towards storing those as fat. Slow burn carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables, they stay in our system quite a bit longer, actually, because of the fibrous content of the food, and they tend to have what we call as a slow burn energy output. So if you are craving carbohydrates, kind of try to lean towards fruits and vegetables rather than starchy, high energy carbohydrate like chips and cookies and pies and stuff. While a sugar high might work temporarily, it does wear off, which causes a drop in our blood sugars, leading to a state of lethargy. Instead of sweets, yeah, like I said, try high protein, high fibrous foods. And Bonnie, as we were talking, as your question said, exercise helps reduce SAD symptoms. SAD treatments can include regular exercise, such as going for a walk, outdoors, exercise classes, or going to the gym and getting the body moving. One of my other jobs is I've been a fitness trainer for, good Lord, 30 years next month. And one of my mantras is nobody ever says they have a bad workout. And exercise is, I believe, one of the most underutilized antidepressants on the planet. If you can get that energy to go get moving for, doesn't have to be an hour, doesn't have to be like some big expedition across the city in your snow pants and your parka, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of, just doing something online, getting some good music, moving around the house, vacuuming, going for a walk down to the post office box, shoveling some snow out of your driveway. It gets the body moving, it gets the heart rate up, it gets the brain firing off, and it gets those endorphins going in the brain and body. So yeah, exercise of any kind has been shown to raise the feel-good neurochemicals called endorphins in our body, which makes us feel happier. It combats the emotional state of sadness and or anxiety we're experiencing around SAD and allows us to concentrate and feel better. It also helps us sleep better. Particularly because I teach spinning classes and aerobics classes, aerobics exercise promotes heart rate to increase, which improves your mood. SAD can often lead to overeating, but by maintaining a healthy workout, it'll balance out those extra calories. Exercise may seem a little simple remedy to a complex problem such as SAD, but it may be worth trying in lieu of medications. Now, again, I mean, everybody has their, you have 5 people sitting in front of me and one has winter blues, feeling I'm functioning. The person at the end could be severely depressed, to the point where they are, in talks or in consult with a doctor or a psychiatrist for an antidepressant. Whatever the person's case is, if they're able to get some exercise, if they're able to get moving around, it's still beneficial. Like I said, doing 30 minutes or more of exercise a day for 3 to 5 times a week may significantly improve depression or anxiety symptoms. But smaller amounts of physical activity, as little as 10 to 15 minutes at a time, may make a difference. So yeah, get out there and get moving and get some fresh air, or even the social aspects of a fitness class people really enjoy. Sometimes we don't realize just when we're depressed how much we reduce our social interactions with people. So that can always cause, further depression. So getting into, meeting people at a fitness class, or, going for a walk with somebody, making plans with a friend to hold each other accountable that we're going to go out today and go for, a 20-minute walk, is a great way of including somebody else in your fitness. So we're going to talk about kind of my go-to when I'm doing therapy with my clients. I'm what you would call a cognitive behavioral therapist, CBT. Now, if you break down the wording of cognitive behavioral, it's cognitive, brain, behavior, right? Our mind leads us to our behaviors, and it's an interloop where we kind of feed off back and forth around our thoughts and our behavioral patterns. I also include a mindfulness approach to my cognitive behavioral therapy approaches, because we live in a society now where everything is so, everybody's in their screens, everybody's distracted, everybody's watching TV on their iPads, in their phones. We're not focused on what's going on as in ourselves internally. So when we do have those times when things kind of become depressive or negative or hurtful or grief, we don't have the tools to go, okay, what's this? Like, what am I feeling? And how do I deal with it? Because everything is external. Everything is outside of us. We're not thinking about what's going on inside of ourselves, and we're not taking care of it. So depression distorts people's reality. So even if they have people around them, and if they don't understand what sad feels like, they feel depressed. This is what we call dampening. Dampening basically is also a more vernacular term, is a stinking thinking, where everything, doesn't matter what the person is thinking about, there's a negative connotation or spin around it, which furthers their inability to get out of the depression. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help people with seasonal depression, but can also help reduce the chances of it reoccurring the following winter. Through certain actions, a person can help themselves feel better. This helps stave off the winter blues occurring season after season, and prevents someone experiencing them again. So if I have a client who comes in and talks about how horrible this winter is, yes, it has been a horrible winter. It's been very cold. It's been dark. We've been dealing with COVID restrictions, everything else that's going on around the world. But rather than talk about what's the negative aspects, we talk about something that they're looking forward to, say in the spring or the summer. Perhaps getting a chance to go visit their family across the other side of Canada again, because flight travel restrictions are opening up, or planting their summer garden, or getting into biking, or volunteering at the local animal shelter. We take negative thought patterns and start interlinking them with positive thought patterns as much as possible. I'm just going to check and see if anybody, no messages. Okay. So how can CBT help with SAD? By challenging and uprooting negative thought patterns. We call that defensive pessimism, which is a recurring thought pattern, not allowing our positive hopes to get dashed. We think, I'm not going to go for a walk today because it's, I'm going to get down the street. I'm going to not be able to get further than a block, and I'm going to let myself down because I think I didn't walk far enough. Rather than seeing it as a negative, think, I got my boots on, I got my snow pants on, I got my parka on, I got my gloves on and my toque. I got out of the house when I really didn't want to, and I walked for a block. And I came home, I got some fresh air, and I saw some ravens playing in the sky above me. Changing that negative to a positive, letting that person feel a sense of accomplishment when they've been people get hard on themselves, and we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. CBT helps individuals to identify and engage in enjoyable activities. Even if it's just thinking about the enjoyable activity in our head, it's not actually being done, but, talking about walking down a sandy beach with this, the ocean lapping up against the sand, and the sun is up in the sky. You can feel the heat, this focus is simply on proactive coping with wintertime. Like I said, we talked about walking down the block. The behavioral aspects of CBT involves participants in an activity structured therapy leading to voluntarily engaging in practical activities that may address the source of depression. By proceeding in a steady, focused, and flexible way, the depression is gradually reduced. So we're going to talk about 5 ways to counter negative thinking. The first one I do with clients is we locate the problem and brainstorm solutions. A good way to do that is through journaling, and talking with me, the therapist, can help a person discover the root of their depression. Once the client and I have an idea, we write down a simple sentence with basically stating what's bothering the client and ways to improve the problem. We also write self-statements to counteract negative thoughts. After we've located the root of the problem, we will write self-statements. So like say, if a client was to say, I'm so depressed right now, rather than saying rather than saying like the other end of the extreme, I'm super happy and things are great in my life. You kind of understand, you embrace the fact that life has its ups and downs, and that right now maybe you're feeling low, and there's going to be a low, but there should be also a high, and we'll work to get up out of that depression. You find that your brain can be actually, I guess hardwired or trained to think positive thoughts. I make the analogy or the comparison when people walk into a room, and the first thing that you look around, let's say you walk into a room and you go, my God, I hate this wall color. Like, when did they paint these walls? Like 1990, like salmon pink went out, 1997. But you say, wow, I really like that vase though. It's very ornate, or it's got a beautiful Chinese, design to it. Or I love what they've done with the plants in the room. I love plants, and look at these beautiful. I was saying to Vicky this afternoon how much I loved her plants behind her. Not that you have horrible paint on your walls, Vicky. No, nothing like that. I was saying though, I love her and the picture of the silhouette up in the corner. We talked about that, and you can literally train your brain to, rather than seeing negative, to see the positive. I guess the glass is half full. Finish each day by visualizing its best parts. As human beings, we have a tendency to ruminate over the things that we might have done that made us feel perhaps embarrassed, or why did I say that in my my group meeting, or I said to the guy at the desk at the gym when they said have a good workout, you too, and they're standing behind a desk, or paper or plastic. People say things because we're not thinking properly, but we get embarrassed. But rather than doing that, think about the things that we did today that were a positive. That's something that we did that was beneficial to other people. Maybe we dropped off some cat and dog food to the local animal shelter, or we made it to the gym and we didn't want to. We sat in our car for 20 minutes fighting with ourselves, squeezing the steering wheels, saying, I'm not going to go in, I'm not going to go in. And then we get in there and we do a great workout, and we come out and we're like, man, was I ever glad that I went and worked out. And the fifth one is learning to accept disappointment as a normal part of life. Vicky and I were talking about situations yesterday on the phone, and we were talking about how perceptions of control in people's lives. We do have levels of control. Yes, we do. But there's things that are in our lives that are completely out of our control. How people think about us, how people react around us, certain situations that are like big macro situations that were just a very, very small moving part. Disappointment in situations is a part of life. And the more quickly that we kind of accept, we may have responsibilities around them, but maybe we don't have any responsibilities around them. But we don't have to justify, how we feel bad about things. If you feel bad, reflect on it, get an idea of where that feeling is coming from, and try to move on from it, and try to spin it with a personal positive experience. That is kind of my presentation for the day, folks. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. This is Bonnie in Milwaukee.
Hello, Bonnie.
Yeah. You had mentioned that you can have SAD in the summertime. Could you explain that a little bit more for me, please?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the difference, seasonal affective disorder is the kind of the go around term, right? So it states that basically we're affected by the season that we're in. So when people have too much sunlight in their systems, and they have their body and their brain has an inability to regulate the melatonin, they can go into what's called hypermania, which is the opposite end of hypomania, which is depression. Hypermania is a very high manic phase in which they have perhaps they're not, again, they can't sleep properly because they suffer from insomnia. They have high spikes in energy, but they also have dysregulation around cognitive thought processes. They can be very impulsive. Their libido can spike, so they might be hypersexualized, or high risk taking behaviors around the mania. There was also cases where people in a hypermanic state have symptoms of schizophrenia, sometimes varying degrees, because there's different types of schizophrenia. One that I read about was paranoid schizophrenics, can sometimes be affected by increased sunlight and hypermania.
Oh my gosh.
I know,
I never I never thought of that.
Yeah, and who does, right? Because we all think kind of like the depressive aspects, right? And because that's kind of our go-to. You said you're from Wisconsin, so I know Wisconsin. Well, I don't know Wisconsin, but when I watched Green Bay Packers play, and they're in the stadium there, and everybody's covered in snow, you guys get some pretty severe winters, right? So
Right. Well, many times. Well, there's the northern part of Wisconsin gets it more than I do. I'm in the southern part near Chicago. But
oh, okay,
weather is so, even from, within 50 miles, it could be different, because our weather is very different from Chicago too.
oh,
But like the last months here, I mean, you could almost just count the number of hours that we had sunlight.
right,
It's been cloudy, 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 cloudy
yeah,
all the time.
yeah, yeah.
And even when I go out at night to look at the stars, you can't see them because there's clouds.
Yeah, you got to come to the Yukon and see our northern lights. They're beautiful.
Oh, I would love that.
Bonnie, what are your summers like? Are they hot and muggy? Are they
Last summer was very hot and muggy.
okay? Because isn't there a Great Lake right next to you guys in that area?
Right. Yeah, I'm 10 miles away from Lake Michigan.
Oh wow, and that is it. Yeah, so that would be, yeah, that would definitely make it hot and muggy, I guess, in the summertime, eh?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but
But
if you,
sometimes, actually, I have experience in the summer, when I see so much sun, I'm not too happy about it.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
it feels like it's too much.
you in the Yukon we have episodes where there's 24 hours of daylight. The sun doesn't actually go
Right.
down for 24 hours. It dips behind the mountains here, but it's still broad, bright, and we use what are called blackout curtains. And if you have again, that if you're feeling maybe that you're susceptible to dysregulation from sunlight, you could get yourself some blackout curtains, so at least your bedroom, when you're trying to sleep, you might be able to block out the sun.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's something else to think about. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.